But let me start with this reflection on the ongoing battle against bushfires. It came from Channel 10's The Project just last night. And as usual for that program, it had the conservative side of politics firmly in its sights.
So no, Scott Morrison, my husband does not want to be fighting fires this summer. But he will fight fires along with all of the other volunteers because it's necessary. And it's necessary because you and all of our leaders for the last 20 years have failed to take decisive action on climate change. They'll do it because they care about our homes, our community, our bushland and our planet. I wish we could say the same for you.
I think what's striking about the disasters that we're facing all concurrently right now is that it's become a political issue. You know, the Australia that I think we all grew up in is a place that draws together in times of disaster and emergency when we face a common threat. And for whatever reason, we're not able to do that right now.
Perhaps the reason people can't come together, Hamish, is because programs like this one are happy to run vicious, partisan and personal attacks on politicians, in this case accusing them of not caring about people, communities and the planet. Yes, using the tragedy of bushfire, a deadly threat we've always faced in this country and will always face in the future, using bushfires to opportunistically slur politicians you disagree with, that's unlikely to bring people together. Meg McGowan spoke on The Project about her husband Graham, a volunteer firefighter. She said he was private and probably wouldn't like being mentioned, but he seemed happy enough to stage these reenactments and help provide some vision for Channel 10's story. Still, Graham, as a fire volunteer, deserves nothing from us but our praise and our gratitude. Meg, however, made a lengthy and nasty attack on Scott Morrison. Yes, we've reached the stage where people blame the Prime Minister for bushfires.
Yes, they're tired, but they also want to be out there defending their communities. And in many cases, you've got to hold them back.
Does he honestly think that this is how we want to spend our summer, with Graham fighting fires every other day and sleeping and resting on the days in between? These fires could go on for days, they could go on for weeks. We have no idea how long this will last. As the Prime Minister uses public money to jet off and have dinner with the Murdochs, does he appreciate what it's like to watch my husband walk in the door day after day, covered in soot, with nothing but a flimsy disposable face mask between himself, his lungs and the toxic smoke?
Pretty ugly stuff. It's all part of this overheated climate debate. And as I said, Graham deserves our thanks. Like other men and women who vote Liberal, Labor and Greens or adhere to faiths of all kinds and hail from lands and cultures of all kinds, they are all equally deserving of our admiration. But I think Meg and The Project really should have disclosed something to us. Given they were launching an extreme political attack on the Prime Minister, bringing in climate policy and public flights and all the rest of it, they should have told us this couple were Greens campaigners. It all makes a little bit more sense now, doesn't it? But even The Project should strive for transparency and decency. Good taste and good sense seem to go overboard when it comes to the climate change debate, don't they? The Madrid Climate Conference was in the news again last week as a silly, biased global climate action survey ranked Australia and America, which are reducing greenhouse gas emissions, way below China and India, that are dramatically increasing them. But most media overlooked this jaundice and just used the survey to attack Australia. Leading ABC opinionista Barry Cassidy tweeted that he didn't think we'd ever have had a government so out of touch with national concern and an opposition so incapable of putting pressure on them. This was extraordinary given the climate election was only 7 months ago. And don't take my word for that characterisation of the election choice. Have a look at this video from the Australian Conservation Foundation. Yep, no one could have dodged the issue, but the campaign against Morrison continues in a bizarre manner. The Guardian's Van Badham fell for a fake story about Morrison moving to Perth to escape the bushfire smoke and, of course, attacked him as, quote, an entirely self-centred prick. That's pretty choice. Pretty much what we come to expect, I suppose. And legendary former editor of the Canberra Times, Jack Waterford, actually wrote in his old paper that had Morrison done something about climate change, it's likely, if not certain, that the severity, extent, earliness and number of recent fires might have been lessened. Now let's have a scientific debate about climate change and its potential or even its current impact on the bushfire threat. But to pretend there's something anyone in Australia could have done anytime, anywhere to change the climate when global emissions are rising dramatically, that's just an absurdity. Still, the ABC actually ran a piece that argued fragile masculinity was to blame for the failure to take global climate action. So now it's a fight to the death between toxic masculinity and fragile masculinity, and there's nothing we can't blame on either of them, I suppose. Over at The Guardian, they took a comment from Rupert Murdoch saying none of his journalists were climate deniers and ran an article full of quotes from News Corp journalists and contributors that seemed to prove Rupert Murdoch's point. They ran a clip of me criticising some of the hysterical reporting and citing experts on drought. They ran some quotes from Andrew Bolt, noting how Therese Rain blames current bushfires on Scott Morrison, but didn't blame the horrors of 2009 on the then Prime Minister, her husband, Kevin Rudd. And The Guardian also reprinted some of Chris Mitchell's writing criticising media reporting of climate issues. All News Corp voices, to be sure, all accepting, well-versed and interested in climate science, but all willing to canvass a range of scientific analysis and all willing to call out alarmism and hypocrisy. Bad luck to The Guardian. Climate everywhere and no denial in sight. By the way, ABC Media Watch host Paul Barry glowingly retweeted that article exposing his own misinformed jaundice. This debate will get smarter one day, we hope. But so far, the ABC seems mainly interested in gotcha moments.
Liberal colleague, the New South Wales Environment Minister Matt Kean, who yesterday said no one can deny that climate change is causing this bushfire crisis and the subsequent smoke crisis we saw in Sydney yesterday.
Look, nobody is disputing the existence of climate change.
Do you agree with Matt Kean there's a direct link between climate change and the bushfires?
We've always been a country that faces severe bushfire and flood and other challenges.
But if I can butt in, Matt Kean says this is in the same speech yesterday, this is something completely different. This is new. We've got the bushfire authority saying all these fires are unprecedented. Many of these fires, as you know, in New South Wales have been burning for many months. In fairness, Minister, I'll give you one more opportunity. Do you agree with Matt Kean there is a direct link between climate change and these bushfires and the smoke in Sydney?
Well,
have you ever, or will you ever, say anything to play down the climate alarmism? That was ABC television. It was the same story on radio.
I think it's fair to observe that in some drought-affected communities, there's a pretty broad spectrum of views about the role of climate change in all of this. What's your view?
Well, my view is the climate's always been changing. But, I mean, if you want to draw me into that debate, you've really asked the wrong question.
Why is that the wrong question?
Well, because whether I believe or don't believe in climate change is really quite irrelevant to what I'm doing. I'm trying to bring together measures, particularly when it comes to resilience, that deals with an ever-changing climate, and it is an ever-changing climate.
So do you believe in human-impacted climate change or not?
Well, look, if this is your gotcha moment, you know, it's not going to get the response you're looking for.
It's not a gotcha moment. It's just
it
pretty
sounds
simple.
like a gotcha moment to me. I'm here trying to work through different measures that will help people who are confronting one of the worst droughts in our history. And you want to line me up and ask me whether I believe in climate change or not.
Well, it's an issue that's clearly impacting the drought. The National Farmers Federation has a very clear policy on this. So it's a relevant question to ask you.
Shane Stone was right. This is gotcha questioning. It's aimed at embarrassing rather than informing, because nothing turns on it. Neither their interview subjects, nor the government, nor the nation can change the climate. And fires and droughts will need to be dealt with now and forever, no matter what. Surely they can't deny that.